Building Success Podcast. I am your host, Matt Ellis. Thank you for joining. Glad to have you back for another episode. Today, got a very special guest. This is Sam Lewis. Sam is the president of ABS, also known as Advanced Business Solutions. They're a managed IT service provider in Louisville. Gotten to know Sam pretty well over the last couple of years. Developed a good friendship with him, and very happy that he's joined us today. Sam, welcome, man. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I feel honored to join. You've got some much better guests than me, but we'll see how I do today.
We won't tell Kara. All right, we'll just keep that to ourselves. So, man, I like to hit us with an icebreaker question to get everything started. My icebreaker question to you is: are you a process guy or are you a result guy?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We're kind of results oriented people, right? So it's hard not to be a results oriented person, but when I was in my career, just doing other roles other than a leadership role, I was definitely a results-oriented person. But nowadays, I can't really be anything but a process-oriented person because you just see there's so many factors that could influence the result. And you could get some really great results with some really bad processes that you'll figure out are bad in the future. And then you can definitely get some bad results with really good processes. And I think the other thing too, with just the economy and how volatility can happen in the economy. There's so many factors outside of your control that can influence, your clients that you work with, your employees. So yeah, it's got to be completely process oriented for me.
Yeah. And I love asking the question. It's been the one icebreaker that I've stuck with because there are some people are very convicted about their answer. And I always share the example of Coach Saban. Coach Saban was very much a process guy that following step A through Z of the process was inevitably going to deliver the outcome that you desired. And then you have and I can't think of a specific example of who it might be, but then you have other folks that are just like, the only thing that matters is the result. And I think that there is some nuance there in whatever, if somewhere in the middle, you got to have a good process to get the result. To your point, if you have a crap process, but you get the result, it's like, well, how did we achieve that? Was the journey there worth it?
Yeah, well, so it's awesome you bring up Coach Saban too. It just kind of makes me think, and this is something I'm sure we'll talk about a bit, but this is a family business. So I had the succession from my dad. I was fortunate enough to do that. And he, I used to be on help desk kind of starting out and just taking tech support calls, and he'd be freaking out about something, and I'd be looking at our dashboards and was like, why is he going crazy? But then it kind of reminds me, Nick Saban, I think his biggest fiery halftime talks have been against those, early on teams where they're blowing him out of the water, but he's not seeing the right things from his teams. And he's like, all right, we're going to play, my ACC bias will show we're going to play Clemson. Hopefully Clemson can play Alabama okay in the future, but we're going to play at Death Valley, and this isn't going to work. It's working right now, but I think it's sometimes tricky. It's tough to tell somebody that they might need to change something if it's working well. But if Saban has the track record where he just knows, right? But for somebody like me who's newer to my career, it's sometimes challenging for me to succeeding in a family business, being like, oh wait, no, I know it's going well, but here's the things I think you need to tweak. But that's where I'm kind of fortunate with the team I have around me and the executive team. And it's more just collaborating with them. They have the experience, and then it's more just kind of what's our read. And then do we think we need to make adjustments to our process, even though the results are good?
Yeah. I'd like to, you mentioned a little bit about the family business piece of it. I'd like for you to talk a little bit about kind of your journey. Cause I know you started working outside of the business. I think you've come back full circle. Obviously, there's some future succession planning stuff. Can you hit on a little bit of that? Tell us a little bit about your leadership journey.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So it's kind of the first thing I'll say is being the boss's son is a huge place of privilege that comes with its own unique sets of challenges. So obviously, there is nothing I could have possibly done to start a help desk at ABS 6 years ago and become president 6 years later. That's just what never happened. Very fortunate, very, very fortunate. And so that's the privilege, right? And yeah, I'm not sitting here pretending I did anything that would have jump-started my career that quickly. So it definitely expedited my career. Challenges is you really do have to win a lot of people over early on. And, to your first part of your question, talking about having a career before joining a family business, I've started to mentor some people that are doing the same thing as me, maybe a little earlier on. And that's crucial, just doing something else, because you really can build some confidence if you've been able to succeed in a different career. And I wouldn't say I was the best at the job I had before, but it was enough where I felt, okay, I can at least contribute and add value. And it's funny because I've got a lot of people on my team that really have only worked at ABS, and they have some of that imposter syndrome. I know we've talked about it before. And it's almost like I feel like I have a bit less of it, because if you start out in one job your whole life, it doesn't matter if you're a succession or not. You might have that imposter syndrome, and it just perpetuates if you're the boss's son. So first thing is, yeah, highly recommend having a job. But they were, my dad specifically was really good about making sure it was a rotation, experiencing all parts of the business. I'd say it to a lot of people, I am losing knowledge of the business every day. It's not, you're extremely lucky as a leader if you can go and rotate around every business, build really good relationships, and then use that understanding to try to influence business decisions as a leader. That's an incredibly unique position that most people will never find themselves in. So I tried to always wield that for good. But now I'm kind of on the downslope where I'm a little more disconnected. So it's adjusting there, and figuring out the other ways that I can add value. You know, the big thing with that is just having a super tenured and great executive team around me. I should never feel like I have to do things that are going to put the company at risk or be outside of the skill set in which I'm best at, because I have other team members that can do it. I think for a long time, I was just trying to prove myself and do everything. And I did everything in not risky way, but it's like, if I could try to close some business, I was trying to close some business. If I could work on the budgets, I was going to work on the budgets. If I could get involved with this legal thing, I would get involved with that. If I could hop on the phones, I'd do that. And now I can kind of not do all that stuff. And now I can actually point at the stuff that I was not good at all. And I'd be like, all right, I was a really bad tier 2 tech. Like, I should never do that again. But hey, maybe I'm okay financially. I should get involved there. I'm okay on the sales side. So long-winded answer, but I definitely recommend doing a different job beforehand. I had a great rotation. Perspective is great. And now I'm in the most lucky position ever where I can really play to my strengths and come to work and do things that give me energy, as opposed to the stuff that was a little more challenging for me.
Yeah. Well, a couple of points on that, man. I appreciate your humility there, and kind of recognizing kind of what you had. And I'll even second what you said about your leadership team. I've gotten to know several people, obviously from our leadership group, and just from interacting, with you guys as we're one of your all's clients. You got some really high level people on your leadership team. And the second thing I say that I think is important, and an important part to bring up, is talking about the breadth of knowledge within the business and how you kind of bounced around and did a lot of the other things. You and I are in a similar position in that we're both going to be transitioning into new leadership roles within our organizations in short order. And I have had to kind of look back and identify the areas at which I'm weak at and that I need to get better on, and financials being one of them. We've got a really solid CFO in place, and having a better understanding of what I need to be looking at from a financial perspective in order to help the business scale, or to make personnel decisions, whatever it might be. Same can be said for business development and marketing, so on and so forth. So that's a good point. And I think is something that I hope resonates with people that are listening. If you want to grow with it, get knowledge of the different sectors of what your business does and become well versed. You don't have to be an expert in all of them, to your point, but you can probably identify, I'm not great at this. And so either I need to back that weakness up with somebody that's strong at it, or work to get better at it. You got to pick and choose one of those. That was a good point. I like that.
Yeah. Well, and it's finding what you want to do in those areas too, right? So you don't have to be the CFO. You've got one that does a great job. Mm-hmm. But how do you, having a certain level of understanding is always going to be beneficial, that I've found. What you choose to do with that understanding is your prerogative. And there's some negative ways you can use your understanding. You can use it to make some gut decisions quickly that might erode people's trust in you having an understanding, or you can use it to try to help the people that work with you and then make good long-term strategic decisions. And so to what you're saying, I think a part of leadership too, and getting those spots and understanding and getting better, is having a good level of trust with the people that work with you to let you do that as well.
Yeah, no, agreed 100%, man. You've touched on it a little bit. Can you talk about what your leadership style is? And I know the buzzwords, you've got, authoritative, you've got, transformative, you have servant leadership. What do you believe Sam's leadership style is?
Yeah. And I wish I knew there's like formal formal titles around all of them, but I definitely don't know it. Yeah, for me, I would say, I think I I think it all starts with trust for me. Like I find people that I trust, and then I trust them, and I do the right things to make people feel empowered to just do their job. So that's not a blind trust thing. I'm always kind of verifying things on the back end, having those difficult conversations when maybe I'm not aligned to somebody or there's some trust issues. But I've noticed that the times in which I'm maybe struggling or things seem harder to me, it's always because there's a trust issue with somebody. And so I've made some mistakes earlier on where I've had trust issues and not just come forth and addressed it and talked about it. And what I'm finding is a lot of times it's never the worst case scenario that you think, that you have to make a tough decision and let somebody go. It's almost always, if you just have the right conversations and that person's aligned to you, your company culturally, which my exec team, like you were saying, they're so well baked out that everybody I work with, even 2 levels down, has been here more than 10 years in a lot of cases. They're a cultural fit. It's just, what was the source of why I didn't trust that person? So, and then talking about it and figuring it out. And sometimes, it's actually my perception that's wrong, but just at least figuring it out. And so having that trust where people can just do their job is really important, but also having that level of understanding with people through that trust to know when things are deviating and you need to have those conversations. So I don't know if that's a leadership style, but it's the opposite of a micromanager. And so whatever that is. And I've tried to micromanage, and there's certain jobs you just have to micromanage. And I don't like the term micromanaging, but you have newer people that need a different level of support. And that's important. And in those jobs, I've just never succeeded. I like managing people that are managing people, right? So I feel like I'm in the right spot with where I'm at now.
Yeah. You mentioned in that response what I would call another buzzword when it comes to leadership, and that was culture. And one of the questions I always ask kind of centers around culture and strategy. I know how focused ABS is on culture. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about your all's culture and how you curate that culture and make ABS such a desirable place to work. And it, you don't have to mention the awesome golf simulator that you guys have.
Yeah.
But just curious, if you take that as a personal weight on your shoulders and kind of lead the charge on that.
Yeah, I actually want to talk about you guys with culture, because I really think culture is just a feeling you get when you walk in a building that happens pretty quickly. And, when I went around your office, because I was at, just for the listeners, I was at ACE last week. And the amount of people where you were introducing me and they actually walked up and shook my hand, and there was somebody on a call, and then they were like, "Oh, I want to meet that person." They shook my hand. It was just like, you could just feel everybody was kind of operating with this same level of respect and just professionalism, but also like genuine kind of wanting to get to know me. And it was different, right? So it was that different feeling I got from walking in the building. And that feeling stuck with me, which is like, there was a lot of really good people in this business that just wanted to shake my hand and look me in the eyes and introduce themselves. And so, yeah, I don't want to be like voodoo, but I really do think we try to get people into our office very specifically because there's a different feeling with our business. And that kind of goes into where my dad and I's roles are. But I still think my dad, because I report up to him, he's the CEO. He's really who I'm looking at to make sure that we're culturally aligned to what we want to do. But it's funny because the more I think about culture, and it's the core values are a part of it, right? It's like, what are your core values? And that kind of establishes your culture, right? And we implemented EOS. And for those that don't know EOS, you make all of your hiring and firing decisions off of how somebody's aligned to your core values. And so culture, it was built because of my dad and the people that he hired. And those people have been here a while. So I'm super fortunate. I don't have to do much to influence that. But there's just so many just like micro things. It's like the flywheel where you just have to do these small things, and all of a sudden it has a big impact. But that's really what it is. Do you really, if you have core values, are they your core values? Because if they are, then you have to make some hard decisions around it, or you have to at least have difficult conversations around it. And that doesn't happen through one good company-wide speech or some stuff on the wall that you put there that says your core values. It's really engaged employees that want to improve. It's really engaged managers that want their employees to improve. And then it's a really clear set of parameters in which we see success. And then it's doing that all the time. So that's not easy at all. But if you get it right, like with you all, it's like you can really feel it. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, when they become a guidepost, and then how you conduct yourself in your day-to-day operations. And I think sometimes culture can be misconstrued as like all we do is goof off and have fun, and we do want to have fun. I know you guys have fun there, and we want to have fun. We want people to be engaged, and they want to come to work, and still operate within those core value principles. But it's also about getting the high performers, putting them in a place of success, giving them the tools they need to be successful, and really getting out of the way.
Yeah.
And you only get back in the way if you are going offline and you're not adhering to what the core values are. I think you and I have talked about it before. We're to the point now where when we do an interview with somebody, that's probably the first thing that goes through our mind. Is this person a culture fit? And not just like, do they have a good personality and they can go around and talk to people, but like, are they going to embody our core values? And if it's a no, the person could have a PhD in whatever, but if it's a no, they're not going to fit in an organization. We're not going to hire them, and it's interesting to see that dynamic and leadership shift. That's certainly something that we've dealt with.
Yeah. Well, the hiring component's super key as well. Hiring to your core values is probably the most important thing. And we've been fortunate too. I don't do much of the hiring. I've got a team that's just really dialed it in. And like you said, it's just that feel. We hire mostly people that come from a different industry. We hire IT people sometimes, but it's all about core values, and we create a lot of structure to just grow people. But we'll take your bartenders of the world, somebody that is fed up with the current industry they're in every day, just because if we can kind of feel that person's going to be a cultural fit, the technical stuff we can teach that all day, but you cannot teach somebody who they are, which is the point. The hiring process is key there.
I couldn't agree more on that one, man. Couldn't agree more on that one.
Yeah.
Moving on, can you talk about what you would classify as maybe one of your biggest successes, and then also coupling that with maybe one of your biggest roadblocks and or failures so far in your journey?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. I would say biggest success is probably just finishing the transition without, losing my relationship with my dad. Like you hear a lot of horror stories there, but more importantly, just keeping the whole, leadership team intact at ABS and having everybody really bought into where we're going. We've got improvements that we need to make here and there, but I think for the most part, we are feeling good about the direction we're headed. And so I didn't do anything to screw that up. So that's great. And just as a part of that journey, being really intentional early on to, like, when I talk to people that are doing the same thing I did, I always tell them, you have a really simple job for the first 2 years. And it's no less than the first 2 years. And if you do this, I guarantee you will be okay. And it's every person that you meet, what can you learn from them? And that's the only thing that you do. If you just do that, and then obviously, and you like work hard and try to do a good job in the role you're in, if you just, everybody you interact with, you respect every role in the business, and you treat that person with, I have so much to learn from you, because you do. If you do that, you're going to be great. And then you don't have to force anything. Everything will fall into place if you do that. So that's what I got right. I don't know why I did it that way, and I made a ton of mistakes early on. I think, and that's kind of going to the mistakes, is I came from a consulting background where I like to fix things. And so when I was early on, the mistake I made was I was trying to add value in the way I knew I could, which is try to talk about process improvements that could be made. And what I realized looking back at that time was that you can add value in ways that are good, but until you have the trust of the people around you, you're going to go nowhere. So I think both of mine kind of relate to each other, where I kind of learned early on, it's like, okay, people aren't really looking for you to show the value that you had from something that you did previously. People are trying to trust you, and then you have a lot to learn from those people. So if you do that, you'll be okay.
Yeah. I asked this question to Kara in the last podcast episode. It was really good with her role with Mom Water, and where she sees herself going, so unique in that it's a family run business. Same kind of concept with you, but I'm curious. I know that you guys have kind of put in place your transition plan. Your dad obviously starting the company and turning this thing into a very successful very successful business, and now you're taking the baton. I'm curious as to how far, talking a little bit about the transition and, what the next few years hold for you, but then, your thoughts on 10 years from now, 15 years from now, and kind of where you want to get ABS to be.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's funny you use the word baton too, because that's what my dad always talked to me about, because we both ran track. We're runners. So the baton relay transition analogy, we, just ate it up. And so that's a good analogy to just kind of talk about where we're at. And he always said, I want to be running fast when I give you the baton, but I'm just out of energy. And then I want you to be up to full speed when you get it. And that's where we're at. So he just handed the baton off to me, and now he's slowing down a little bit. And so, yeah, you can kind of see him in the background. He's working less. He's only working 3 days a week right now. He's taking vacations more, which is awesome. But I still lean on him for that kind of sage wisdom that you would look for. And really, like, for the big decisions, having somebody like him to just really help me understand if I'm headed the right direction is irreplaceable. And he still has so much respect around here. If I have his air cover, it's great for me. When I look 10 to 15 years ahead, there's really two things that drive me. And I think money is a part of it, but it's definitely not money. It's the health of the company, and it's the engagement of the employees. Like those are the two things that drive me, and those are closely related to each other. You have to have a financially healthy company to have a company that people want to work at. So that's table stakes as a part of the whole thing. But the things I've kind of come to the conclusion on is people want to work for a growing company that's growing in a smart way, because a growing company builds opportunity for people in that company, and it helps them advance their career. So that's something early on. We both know Randy Fields. He kind of told me that one. He's like, yeah, that's why you want to have a growing company. So I want to grow for sure, but I want to grow organically and in the safest way possible. So that's kind of talking about not putting the business at risk and having engaged employees. Is we need to grow to have engaged employees, career growth, and get people excited about being at work. But I have no side of me or no ounce of me that wants to grow in an unsafe way. So one cool thing about our business is my dad's never taken on debt at all in the business. And that's super important to me too. So organically grow, no debt, and really, really, really focusing on the clients that we want to be working with. We could easily sell to much larger businesses than 20 to 400 user environments, which is what we would consider our sweet spot. We work outside of that a bit. We could find other companies that we would get a lot of revenue from, but we would have to change our operations to support those businesses, right? And so that's all I'm looking at. 10 to 15 years from now, hopefully we'll be in a few new markets, although we're already kind of in a bunch of different states, but kind of an established presence outside of Kentucky. That's going to be really important, hopefully more than one. I think we have enough scalability in our office here where we can grow. We still have room upstairs. We got room outside, and we've got some remote support models if we especially go into new markets. I think just adapting along the years, 10 to 15 years from now, who knows what AI's like, what's AI going to do for the business we work with, for our business, right? And so, and that's part of it too, right? Is don't make, right now, this is the first year we've been doing a budget for our company, right? And that's part of our growth and maturity. That where we want to be is we want to be a company where we're kind of managing the different departmental budgets to empower our leaders, have them really engaged from that financial perspective too. But when you manage to a budget, you make short-sighted annual-based decisions. You've got businesses need to be willing on a dime to make a large investment into their infrastructure to start using AI more, or your business is going to fail. So how do you balance all of that, stay in front of that, but make sure that you're still making financially savvy decisions? It's challenging, but that's when I look at the long-term horizon, it's not being afraid to make those short-term costs. And that's why I'm fortunate to be privately held and have my dad aligned to that vision, because if we weren't, it would be different. And then organically grow in a safe way, and always make sure that the employees are at the top of our mind, because the selfish side of it is retention is the most important thing when you talk about cost to a business. So obviously, I joke too, the last thing I want to do, I can guarantee you this, I won't be working here if this is the case. I would not walk into a building where everybody's miserable every day, because that would make me miserable. I'd rather do so many different things than do that. So that's the selfish side of it too, is like, well, I don't want to walk into a building where everybody's miserable. Like, that sounds terrible.
Yeah. You said, something interesting that you kind of hit on there that I liked when talking about your all's core services, and maybe your vision from where you go is that hyper specialization piece and just being the best at what the service offerings that you guys provide. And I think sometimes even I get wide eyed, sometimes like, squirrel, you're chasing that next shiny object when in turn, maybe it's looking inward. It's like, how can we be better at what we're doing? How can we provide more value to our client, expand our service offerings that are still within our core, our core competencies.
Yeah.
And it is certainly a mindset shift for me. And I know that with Scott moving into the founder's role and me going into the CEO, one of the terms that he always has that I've always loved is mitigate risk and allocate resources. And you kind of spoke on that, like not seeing that shiny thing and just going 1,000 miles an hour at that shiny thing. And then you're leaving all your core competencies over here that start kind of falling by the wayside. And so understanding that mindset, and I would even add in some capacity, adding to that, the culture piece of it, because you're right. If you've got people that are unhappy coming in, that's going to translate down to your clients. There's no doubt about it. And then they're not providing the best service that they can provide, and you don't have a business anymore at that point. It becomes that important. So that was a good, that for sure, good piece on that. I really like that mindset. As we kind of wrap up and put a bow on it, I like to ask everybody. I always like to walk away with either a cool leadership quote or a book that you've read that you like, a quote from a book, or even a book that you're currently reading. I'm curious if you got one for us.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't gonna be like a niche book, but Extreme Ownership. I don't know. Have you read that before?
Jocko book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not, like when you think of Jocko, you think like ex-military guy, like super, tough and all that stuff. And that's not really kind of what I took out of it. And I don't think that's his intention too, but, it was a pretty timely, our VP of service, Buck Hartledge, who reports to me now, when I was starting out, he gave me that book to read. And one thing I'll say is I'm just super fortunate. I think one of the biggest things when you talk about a leader's journey is who managed them before. And my job before ABS, I had this manager that I just absolutely loved and respected. His name was Nick Barquette. And I couldn't really put a finger on why I just loved him so much. And it was extreme ownership. And I didn't know that that's what it was until I read the book, but I always tried to emulate what he did. And then when I read that book, I was like, that's exactly what he's doing. That's kind of there's tons of other books you can read. Good to Great is awesome, right? The EOS books like Traction, Rocket Fuel, those have changed me. But when you talk about a foundational way to live your life, just across the board, extreme ownership will always be number one for me. There's never a situation where there isn't a reason for you to not just own up to your mistakes and then use that as an example for others to be comfortable doing the same thing. Debrief to win. That's another kind of related thing, but all of that to me, everything comes from just being a leader that will always take ownership for the things that they did wrong, but in a genuine way. I've seen people do the extreme ownership thing where it's like, oh, they're just doing extreme ownership. Like they're just taking ownership, but they don't really mean it. It's like people can really sense it out of you if you take ownership for something and you actually mean it. And that's the foundation of what you're doing versus you're just doing it because you're checking a leadership box. So yeah, highly recommend.
I'll second that. Really good book. Love that one. Read that one. He's got a couple of others that I've read as well that are all pretty dang solid. And I think that's that Navy SEAL mentality. When you really get into it, you can feel that just oozing out of that book, and rightfully so. I mean, the most premier military unit in the world, in my opinion. I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about ABS as we kind of put a bow on everything here. I will say I've enjoyed having a lot of like you on because these are, and even Landon, I had Landon on at one point because I've actually used the product of the person that I've had on. Like, Landon, we've used Goodson for some of our swag. He does a lot for, the folks in our leadership group. Kara, she brings the samples of Mom Water. And if I get an opportunity, and it's also like, I want to support that brand, but I brag on that. I can say that we are users of ABS. You guys have been extremely helpful for us. I look back 4 or 5 years ago and it was just the wild, wild west in terms of what we had for infrastructure. We had no idea who had what laptop. There's no continuity on anything. I'm assuming at some point we got phished or spammed or God knows what at that point. But then to add on to that, CMMC is coming. And, we talked about that earlier this week when you were here. You guys have really helped us get prepared for that CMMC journey, and I really appreciate it. But wanted to give you guys a chance to kind of plug yourselves and what your all's value prop is to your clients.
Yeah, definitely not as cool as Goodson Supply Company, and definitely not Mom Water. That would be way better. Yeah, we don't have good laptop samples. Nobody's sharing about that. But yeah, no, we are a managed service provider, and the simplest way to put that is we are the IT department for small and medium-sized businesses. So people pay us a monthly fee to be their IT department, but we try to create a relationship, like we were talking about trust earlier, a foundation of trust, so that the businesses we work with know that we've got their best interests in mind, and really try to help strategically guide our clients from an IT perspective. You talked about CMMC. So working with somebody knowing that we're going to help them with CMMC, and yeah, there's going to be a lot of costs associated with that, but having a client that knows that we have their best interests in mind when we're making those recommendations. So I would say just being that strategic partner from an IT perspective is what we do.
Yeah. Right on. Sam, thanks for coming on, man. I greatly appreciate it. Want to thank everybody for listening. Hope you all gleaned some good insights on it. This is the Building Success Podcast with Matt Ellis. Again, Sam, thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it, man. Have a good one.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.